Dear viewers, today we'll attempt a comparative study of the nature of the state in Hindu and Buddhist tradition. We know that the core issues in the study of political science is state and government. But we also need to know that the nature of state and government varies from time to time and under different dynasties. It is also imperative to understand that ancient India needs to be studied from various texts and literature as well as the foreign accounts of travelers. In order to understand the nature of the state in the Hindu tradition, we need to first focus on the various texts and what do they speak about the theories of the origin of state, the functions of the state and Raj Dharma. After that, we would move on to Digha Nikaya and how this Buddhist text exemplify the nature of the state. Let us begin our analysis with an understanding of the nature of the state in the Hindu tradition. We begin by analyzing the theories of the origin of state. If we look into the theories of the origin of state, there were three broad theories about the nature of the state. The first is called the divine origin theory, the social contract theory, and the third is said to be the organic theory of the state. The question of this origin of state has by the divinity or through a contract has been discussed in the Vedas, Kautilya's Arthashastra, Manusmriti, Shukraniti, as well as in the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata. It should be noted that the origin of state in the Hindu tradition is intimately connected with the origin of kingship. So when we are studying the origin of state, we are also studying the origin of kingship. Almost all theories propounded by Western political philosophers about the origin of state, that is the divine origin theory or the theory of force or the social contract theory, are also found in Indian texts. So herein we find some similarity with Western political ideas and Indian political ideas. Now, in fact, if you look into the divine origin theory, the state, according to the divine origin theory, is said to be a divine institution. Most of the texts analyzed origin of state and kingship to be a divine institution. For example, Manusmriti elaborates the creation of the king by God. Manu notes that king was created out of 8 particles of the Lord. The great epic Ramayana clearly identifies the king to be of divine origin. It is stated that men approached Brahma, the creator, to provide them a king, and accordingly, after the gods spared a portion of their power, a being in human form emerged and he was declared the king. The Agni Purana states that the king was the embodiment of Lord Vishnu, the god who sustains the earth. However, it is pertinent to note that king's divinity was never intended to justify irresponsible rule or arbitrariness. It serves as a means of promoting defense to authority. Let us now try to understand that if the state and the king was created by God, did the people have any role to play? So we shall look into the theory of social contract. We need to understand that the concept of social contract as it emerged in the West, it is not the same as in India. If you remember, students, in the Western theories, the state originated because of a social contract between the people and the ruler. The three most popular social contract advocates were Thomas Hobbes, John Locke, and J.J. Rousseau. These three theories spoke about the state of nature, that is the conditions prevalent before the emergence of the state, the nature of the contract which led to the creation of the state, and the powers of the king. However, though we can hear of some sort of a social contract, but the nature of the contract, that we find in the Mahabharata or in the Arthashastra is quite different from the Western precepts regarding the social contract. The first reference to the election of the king is contained in the Aitareya Brahmana. The gods and demons were fighting amongst themselves, and the demons were always victorious. And the gods decided that they were losing out because they did not have a king. Hence they proposed to make Soma their king, and did so when all consented to it. There is another reference to the election of a king amongst themselves in the Aitareya Brahmana. Indra was made the king of gods because he was the most valiant and powerful. The gods, along with great god Prajapati, deliberated upon the choice of Indra, as he was the most vigorous, the most strong, the most valiant, the most perfect, who carries out best any work. Hence, they installed him as the king of gods. Now we can say that ancient Indian texts focused on social contract but of a different nature. Apart from the Aitareya Brahmana, we also find evidence of social contract in the Mahabharata. In the Shanti Parva of Mahabharata, we find the concept of Matsya Naya, which is a condition in which small fishes feel prey to big fishes. Now, Matsya Naya is a condition of anarchy and disorder. This is quite similar to the state of nature espoused by Thomas Hobbes. State of nature is a condition before the coming of the state. So before the state or the king was created, there was absolute anarchy and chaos. To avoid this crisis and come out of a life from anarchy, people collectively agreed to have a set of laws and appeal to God for a king who would maintain law and order in society. It was also argued that without appealing to any divine agency, people on their own selected a person on whom the authority was vested to protect human society. We find reference of both divine origin and social contract theory in the Mahabharata. Now we also need to understand that Kautilya's Arthashastra speaks about social contract. It begins with the exposition of anarchy, wherein it said that to overcome chaos and anarchy, people elected Manu as their king and undertook to pay 1/6 of their grain and 1/10 of their articles of merchandise. In return for the taxes, the king guaranteed peace, order, happiness, and welfare of the people. The contractual origin of kingship is in the Arthashastra is not to impose limitations on royal power. On the contrary, the obligations put upon the people are burdensome and designed to strengthen royal authority. Because if the people do not pay taxes, they will not be protected by the king. So it is upon the people to pay regular taxes on time. The king who assures security and well-being to the subjects by eliminating wrongful acts through coercion and taxes should never be disregarded. Hence we find Kautilya's contractual theory was an effort to buttress royal power as that of Hobbes rather than to limit it like that of John Locke. We also need to understand that there was another theory of the state. We call it the organic theory of the state. The organic theory of the state espouses the fact that the state is constituted by various elements which act as limbs of the state. It also believes that the state is like an organism and different functions are performed by different parts. The 10th hymn of the 8th chapter of the Atharva Veda gives a picture of the organic origin of the state. On the basis of Atharva Veda, several stages of the evolution of the state can be traced too. The hymns of the Atharva Veda state that the earliest phase of human life was the stage of Vairagya or statelessness. It was a state of complete anarchy. However, gradually, with the establishment of the state, stability came upon. To fulfill the needs of agricultural society, family, property, gradually the institution of kingship and state emerged. In fact, along with the state, several other institutions emerged. Two prominent assemblies were the Sabha and the Samiti, which played an important role in the organization of the state. Such an organic explanation of the state can also be found in Kautilya's Saptang theory of the state, where he says that the state is constituted of 7 organs and each organ is complementary to the other one and plays a very important role in the fulfillment of the aims and objectives of the state. The Saptang theory postulates 7 elements of the state. They are Swami, Amatya, Janpad, Durga, Kosh, Danda and Mitra. Among these 7 elements, the king or the Swami is the most important. Sukra Nitisar, another text, also speaks about the state and compares it with that of a human body. According to Sukracharya, the king is the head, the ministers are the eyes, the treasurer the mouth, the army the heart, the forts the hands, and the territory the feet. The Mahabharata also speaks about the importance of different elements in the functioning of the state. Thus, we find that this organic theory of the state is quite similar to the modern conception of the state, where the state comprises of 4 main elements: territory, population, government, and sovereignty. Let us now move on to another important aspect of the state, that is, functions of the state. In fact, it has been found that all the ancient Indian literature focused on the need for the establishment of a welfare state. The state was supposed to create conditions for good life. In fact, it was a duty of the state to protect the people from external aggression and internal disturbance. The Vedic state was entrusted with the task of protecting subjects from foreign aggressor, and the monarch was supposed to be the symbol of law, morality, and dharma. As society became complicated, the state's activity also increased. It was the duty of the state to protect dharma, earth, and calm. Since the main functions of the state was to uphold dharma, the king had to maintain it by affording protection to his subjects. Not just this. The state was also supposed to provide justice, righteousness, law and order. In fact, it was believed that defending the community and ensuring that they are well protected was one of the foremost principles of statecraft. The state was also the wielder of danda, punishment. Dandniti was an important part of Raj Dharma and was also an important part of state activity. In the economic sphere, the state had to cater to the needs of the people by facilitating proper measures for the conduct of trade and commerce. It was also the duty of the state to ensure that people enjoyed religious freedom. Apart from the functions of the state, ancient Hindu literature also focused on Raj Dharma, the duties of the king. The king was the head of the state and he was responsible for protecting the people and their lives. Emphasizing on Raj Dharma, Mahabharata has maintained that Raj Dharma is greater than all other dharma and it is the principle of all dharmas. It was advocated that all castes should be protected and all renouncement are included only in Raj Dharma. In fact, it was believed that the Ramayana, the Mahabharata, as well as Manusmriti focused on essential functions of the king espoused in Raj Dharma. In fact, it has been observed that the king had different functions to perform not only during normal times but also during times of crisis and disaster. Thus, modern concepts of disaster management can also be located in various functions of the king. In fact, it has been said in the Vishnu Puran that anarchy prevails where there is no Raj Dharma. It has also been espoused in Kautilya's Arthashastra that in the happiness of the subjects lies the happiness of the king, in their welfare, his welfare. That the question of enormous powers for the king and proper implications for Raj Dharma has been contained in all Hindu texts. Let us now move on to another very important aspects of governance, and that is the notion of Buddhist tradition of statecraft. We need to understand that though Hindu scriptures focused on different aspects of Raj Dharma, Dandaniti, foreign policy and their applications, the ultimate goal was preservation of human life and preservation of dharma. And that is the reason why Hindu political tradition emphasized not just on state and government, it also emphasized on various aspects of good governance. It is an important arena of discussion on the Hindu scriptures, how the scriptures focused on principles of good governance. Good governance implied goodness of the government. It was an important part of the state functioning to ensure there was transparency, accountability, and the citizens' grievances were redressed at the proper time. That is the reason why Arthashastra focused on such principles as that the ministers and the civil servants should be appointed and recruited after rigorous examination. The Arthashastra also focused on regular transfers of officials to curb corruption. Importance was given to public opinion and dissemination of cabinet discussions. It was also believed that the state was not an arbitrary one. It was powerful, but definitely it was not despotic. The Mahabharata as well as the Manusmriti focused on an ethical dimension of Raj Dharma. The state was supposed to cater to the needs of one and all. Thus, we can find that the nature of state in the Hindu tradition focused not just on the conventional functions of the state, but it also focused on welfare functions in terms of providing food security, in terms of providing welfare services catering to the needs of the old and disabled. At the same time, the state also focused on maintaining adequate interstate relations. Now, the Hindu state can be ideally characterized not just an absolute monarchy, but a constitutional monarchy, and in some parts, some form of republicanism can also be seen. In the light of this analysis, let us now try to move on to another important area of discussion to understand nature of the state was described in the Buddhist tradition. The history of political thought and the theory of the state can be traced to the Buddhist texts of Digha Nikaya and Anuguttara Nikaya, two of the 5 Buddhist collections. Buddhist theory of kingship is contained in Agana Sutta, which is the 27th sutta of the Digha Nikaya. Please note that Digha Nikaya is in a dialogue form. It was a discourse imparted by Buddha to 2 Brahmins. They were Bharadwaj and Vasistha, who left their family and caste to become monks. Buddhist political thought emphasizes on 3 aspects of the state. 1. The state of nature, the conditions prevalent before the emergence of the state. 2nd, the social contract. And 3rd, the duties of the ruler. Let us now try to understand what did Buddha speak about the state of nature. If you remember, students, we spoke about Matsanaya in Hindu political thought, which refers to a state of anarchy and statelessness. Buddha offers a detailed analysis of the state of nature. Initially, the state of nature was one of tranquility, peace, and order. There was absolute harmony among living beings. Gradually, with the passage of time, evil emerged and the divine stage transmitted into earthly stage, wherein earthly inhabitants were not divided into social classes. However, it was found that with the passage of time and the development of agriculture and plantation, many stages of division of labor emerged and the institutions of family and property emerged. With the emergence of family and property, the concept of mine and thine emerged, leading to feuds and disputes among the people. Thus, we find that concepts like theft, robbery, civil disputes emerge, leading to various forms of conflicts among people. To institutionalize the system of just punishment and to take care of the rottenness which has set in the society, people assemble to choose the chief as most favored and capable person from amongst themselves. Thus, we find that people being tired of the evil conditions and anarchy in the state of nature, elected a ruler from amongst themselves. He was called the Great Elect or the Mahasammata. A point to be noted that while in the case of the Hindu tradition we find a social contract theory, but there the social contract theory was envisaged as creation of God. For example, the Aitharya Brahmana speaks about Indra being chosen as the king. Here we find the people playing a dominant role in Buddhist political system. State emerges as a punitive institution with the aim of maintaining order as a result of agreement between the ruler as well as the ruled, in which the ruled transfers part of their sovereignty for specific purpose. The relationship between the state and the subjects is one of contractual obligation in which one commands and the other obeys. State is the central institution of the society which was distinct from other institutions. The Mahasammata was not a lawgiver or legislator. He was an executive head which enforced the customary or tribal conventions, and the Mahasammata was a punitive authority to control transgressors of law. Let us now try to understand what were the specific features of the social contract as elaborated in the Digha Nikaya. The political agreement was preceded by the establishment of a social agreement which markedly distinguishes the Buddhist contract theory from the one which can be inferred from the Brahmanas. This is more akin to John Locke's conceptualization of a civil society created first and then a political society. Political compact in the Digha Nikaya not only lays a different type of emphasis on the qualifications for election of the king, but also clearly states the obligations and duties of the two partners, the ruler and the ruled. In contrast to several obligations of the king, the people are designated to have just one duty, mainly to pay a part of their paddy as contribution to the king. The rate of taxation is not prescribed, but contemporary law book of Bodhayana lays down that king should protect the people in return of 1/6 of the produce. Originally, the agreement takes place between one Kshatriya and another and the people. And it was later on that this emergence of Kshatriyas came a class. So later on, the rulership went to a class of people, and hence we find Buddhism focusing on republicanism. It is pertinent to note that Buddhist theory of contract does not apply to a single individual who is the head of the state, but it applies to a class of people who were responsible for ensuring law and preservation of order within the empire. Now, did the people during Buddhist rule have a right to revolt against the ruler? The right to revolt was justified, but there were some grounds for revolt. Number one, the kingship arose out of a contract between the subjects and one was chosen from them. The sovereign rights of the king were limited to the protection of subjects and punishment of wrongdoers, and the king or the Kshatriya or the ruler was bound by the law of the land. The people, according to Jataka evidence, maintained their rights and privileges for a long time. they derived their importance partly from their numbers and from the organizations of which they were members. Now, in order to be a Mahasammata, he had to possess certain qualities. Buddha said that the qualities of the subjects of the kingdom depend largely on the behavior of the kingdom's ruler, and therefore the ruler should possess certain important qualities. Buddha outlined the 10 important virtues of the ruler, and he calls it Dasa Raja Dhamma. Let us try to understand what were the 10 virtues that the Mahasammata or the great elect or the ruler had to possess. The first and foremost important virtue that a ruler in the Buddhist tradition had to possess was dana or generosity. Secondly, he focused on sila or morality. Thirdly, focus was on parikkaga, which was making sacrifices. Fourth was focus on ajava, which was honesty and integrity. The ruler should be honest and ethical. Fifth was madhava or kindness. Sixth was focus on topo or austerity in habits. Focus was on a simple lifestyle. Seventh was akhoda, which was non-hatred. Eighth, ahimsa, meaning non-violence. Ninth, khanti, which was patience and tolerance. And 10th, avirodha or non-enmity. If you take a look at these 10 principles, you would observe that most of the principles focused on an ethical lifestyle to be followed by the Mahasammata. In other words, if he observes an ethical lifestyle, the subjects would also follow a similar lifestyle, that the king would be a replica of the society. What were the duties of the king? The first and foremost duty of the king for which he was chosen was inflicting punishment, ensuring that evil doers were punished appropriately. The second function of the king was righteous governance. Focus was on the ways of governance, how to bring about the right model of governance. Third, protection from external aggression and internal rebellion. Fourthly, focus was protection not only to subjects or religious bodies, but the king or the Mahasammata had to ensure that he protected all living beings, it can be beasts or birds. Provide wealth to the poor, because the Mahasammata should know that poverty leads to anarchy. Teaching people to practice the principles of Dhamma, righteous life in deeds, words, and thoughts. We need to understand that the focus was more of creating a stable order within the society. Another very interesting proposition put forth in the Digha Nikaya is the democratic nature of the Sangha. We find ideas of democratic governance in the Digha Nikaya and Agana Sutta. Professor Rhys Davies is of the opinion that the Buddhist Sangha was founded on democratic principles. According to him, the Buddhist Sangha was a kind of republic in which all proceedings were settled by resolutions agreed upon in regular meetings of its members, which were held subject to the observance of certain established regulations and the use of certain kinds of words, what we call today parliamentary language. The Buddhist Sangha had a body of rules regarding the form of resolutions to be moved in the assembly. The concept of quorum can also be found in Buddhist Sangha. Thirdly, in case of a difference of opinion, the matter would be resolved by the rule of majority. Complicated matters were referred to the decision of committees. And finally, definite rules seem to have existed regarding such matters as votes of the absentees. Another important principle is the principle of righteousness in the governance of the state. The king is bound by the same set of ethical principles as that of the subjects. The king, by example, causes the happiness or misery of the people. Political righteousness rises to the level of cosmic principle of creation. It might appear to be an exaggerated version, but one cannot deny that the conduct of the king influences the behavior of the subjects. The principle of political righteousness is extended to include the concept of world ruler or Chakravartin. The attributes of this ruler comprises not only universal supremacy or successful administration, but also, above all, righteousness. In the sphere of foreign relations, the Chakravarti's conquest of the kingdom is achieved not by force but by righteousness. How do we evaluate Buddhist principle of kingship? Buddhist principle of kingship is based on a two-way contract between the people and the ruler. The king is only primus inter pares. There is a concept of deliberative democracy in the functioning of the Sangha. Third, the principle of righteousness or Dhamma was the all-comprehensive principle. And finally, the nature of the state was based on welfare principle. Basically, we need to understand that the Buddhist principle of statecraft attempted to replace the Brahmin Kshatriya alliance of the Hindu tradition with the Kshatriya Vaishya alliance. Let us quickly summarize what we have studied today. We found that in terms of duties of the king and the nature of rulership, similar principles can be found in the Hindu and Buddhist system of kingship. However, when it comes to the nature of the social contract theory for the creation of the state, the Buddhist and the Hindu tradition have different insights to offer. We also find both the systems emphasizing on a rigorous system of state welfare. But we need to understand that while the Hindu tradition focused on a monarchical system of government, Buddhism focused on republicanism. Next, we need to understand that while in the case of Hindu tradition, rulership was in the hands of the Raja or the king, in terms of Buddhism, rulership was in the hands of a social class. Finally, we need to understand that while democratic principles can be found in Buddhist statecraft, we can see principles of good governance in Hindu tradition. Ultimately, both the traditions emphasized on a just and ethical model of statecraft and governance. That's all for today. Thank you.